Sorry about the Dolphins, by the way. I know you were a fan.
It's it's the same story every year. At least this year they made it to the playoffs. So
Yeah, and I mean, you almost beat the Bills with like your third string quarterback. So
no, they they made it entertaining. So
yeah,
that's a plus.
you could see my team over here.
I
They
see
fare a
Kansas
little
City. Yeah,
better. Yeah.
I was rooting because you ride for the brand, and if I'm a Dolphin fan, that means I'm an AFC fan. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I thought when Mahomes went out with the ankle at halftime, I thought it was over. All right, we're getting
gotta have
comments.
drama, man. You gotta have drama.
You gotta have drama. All right, so it looks like we're live. We're getting comments. Welcome back, Scott. Thank you so much for being here. You're truly just an encyclopedia of knowledge. Um, I thought we'd start off today talking about the Chinese balloon and the UFOs that the United States has been saying they're shooting down over Canada. They're saying they're over Latin America, and all of this nonsense. To me, it seems like it's just a way to distract people from what's really going on. We're on the brink of World War III. The U.S. just destroyed up, or I'm sorry, they destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines, which are an act of war against Germany. Yeah, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are. It's just a big distraction. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, let's start off with first principles. Every nation is a sovereign nation, and therefore is entitled to protect its airspace. And it's not a good thing to have balloons with sensor packages flying over your airspace without permission. So let's not pretend that that this isn't a potential issue. I mean, so if you frame it as a balloon with a sensor package flying over American territory without permission, that's something that America has a right to say, we're concerned. But then let's just talk further. We know exactly what this balloon is. I'm just telling you straight up right now, we know exactly what this balloon is, and it's not a spy balloon. That's just absurdity, lies put out by the Biden administration to distract people from, the collapse of American, foreign policy around the world, both in Europe and in Asia. China has for some time now, working in concert with the United States, by the way, been carrying out experiments and investigations of the atmosphere, especially the stratosphere, to see how it impacts climate change, global warming. The Chinese have, for many years now, been doing tethered balloon experiments over the Tibetan plateau because the glaciers are melting. Imagine that. You're concerned about glacier melt. So they put the tethered balloons up there with a sensor package designed to assess, small water particles and things that are up there to see how that impacts what's going on in the ground. And once they got that data collection, though, then they need to find out, because the stratosphere and the atmosphere is not static. It just doesn't say in the say, it's actually moving. And it moves around the world. And so they want to capture that same experiment around the world to see where the changes are being made, where, for instance, what's happening over Tibet, is it happening because of things that are happening in Europe, things that are happening in the United States, et cetera. So they have this experiment package that's designed to go up there and gather this information. We know about it. In fact, there's some evidence that we have helped design certain aspects of this package. And I believe data is shared between China and the United States, on this data, because there's a collective interest in global warming and in climate change. How that balloon got to where it is, and et cetera, that's a fair question, literally a fair question that should be asked. I have a funny feeling that the Chinese have told the United States about this. I have a funny feeling that the Chinese said, hey, we lost control of one of our balloons. Because what happens is a balloon will go up, and like a drone, you're going to put it up there and it's going to be receiving instructions. But you know what happens to a drone when it loses satellite contact? It starts going into a pattern, a search pattern, where it's looking for that signal until it can reconnect with the signal, boom, and then get positive control and get back on its thing. I believe that balloon went up because everybody's like, well, it has a propulsion system and it has rudders that can steer it. Yay. And they're like, we don't know why it's going in this certain pattern. I do. I believe I do. I believe that they lost contact. They broke contact, and the balloon is doing a search up in the stratosphere looking for the signal, but it can't go backwards. Once it's up there, it's sort of committed to drifting from a west to east configuration because that's sort of the way Mother Nature is taking it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's doing this search pattern, trying to make contact, but it's going further and further away from China. This is all known. No, this is not surprising anybody, but they had to make it an issue. So now we're tracking the balloon, the Chinese balloon. And now, of course, the Republicans are saying Biden's weak. And so Biden says, well, your Republicans were weak because 3 of these balloons overflew America during Trump. And then NORAD, now everybody's saying, why aren't you tracking this stuff? NORAD's going, well, we're not really looking for that stuff. It's not a threat.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is now. So they have to fine tune their radars and they go, bing, bing, bing. Holy crap, the sky, excuse my language. Oh, the sky's full of balloons. Of course it is. You know how many weather balloons are released into the atmosphere every single day? Hundreds, if not thousands. Now, most of them go up, pop, and come down. But some get up there and they just stay. Some are designed to stay. And they're floating there. How many airliners have crashed because they ran into a balloon? None. But suddenly it's such a threat to national security and aviation security that we have to send an F-22 or an F-16 fighter with advanced air-to-air missiles up there shooting. They miss. That's $400,000. Shoot another one, $400,000. The cost of putting the airplanes up, probably $150,000, $200,000. That's $1 million. Bam! Hey, thank you, American taxpayer. $1 million to do what? To do what? Save America from what? Balloons that have been up there. We only found them because NORAD was told to tweak their system, so that they now can detect, a penny in the pocket of a traveler. That's, TSA has to refine their metal detectors. They're looking for weapons, knives, etc. What they're not looking for is, the bobby pin from Aunt Susie that left it in the, laundry and it got stuck in your pant. But now NORAD's been told, tweak the system so you find the bobby pin, and boom, lo and behold, there's bobby pins up in the air. And now we're told, we have to panic. This is a threat because we've overreacted to the Chinese balloon. So we're reacting to this. And now we have airplanes up shooting down. I mean, we are going to have an entire generation of fighter pilots who are going to be walking around bars bragging about how many balloons they shot down. I mean, there's not going to be red stars and, Nazi crosses of the old fighter pilot days. No, man. They got balloons now. And I guarantee you there's going to be pilots out there getting in line saying, hey, I've already shot down 2. I need 3 more. And then I'm an ace. I'm being facetious here, but this is how stupid this is. It's 100% distraction. There's no threat posed to America whatsoever by this. The sensor package, which we've collected, isn't a sophisticated spying thing. It's a weather reconnaissance package that we know about. Major aspects of it were jointly developed between China and the United States. Nothing about this took us by surprise. This is pure political BS.
What I don't understand is why anyone would believe the story that it's a spy balloon, right? The only way they could think that is if they think of China as some weak, backwards nation. China has satellites. China has spy satellites just like we do. Why do they need to use a balloon to spy on American missile silos? And I've heard that even if you did use a balloon for that, you would have to have some very special camera system to stabilize the camera because you're in the air and you're being blown around by the wind. Yeah,
no, first of all, you get better photographs from the satellites, geosynchronous orbit, et cetera. The balloon is not a stable platform. There might be some SIGINT aspects if you're going with low power, systems. The closer you get to the system, the stronger the signal is, and you can collect it. So a satellite may not be able to get things, but I'm not going to get too much into that conversation. I'm just going to say that a satellite can probably do everything that balloon can do and better, but it's none of my business, and we shouldn't be talking about it. But from to call this an intelligence collection system, let me just talk about our things. If we're concerned about it, I mean, right now we shot it down, and now we have divers pulling debris out of the ground. Why didn't we? We have a couple aircraft that are pretty good at this kind of stuff. And I'm not talking about fighters. We could have brought in, we have an airplane that actually is configured. I think Cobra Ball is its name or something like that, to go up and take high resolution photographs of missile reentry vehicles. So when for instance, the Russians fire a missile test, as it comes in, this plane's flying and it's snap, 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 snap the pictures to collect intelligence about that as it comes in. And some of the photos allegedly are quite high resolution. I mean, again, I'm not giving away classified things. Guys, just study optics, study advanced optics, study advanced gyroscope stabilized optics. Now take that optic configuration, mount it on an airplane at a certain altitude, and measure the distance that a warhead's coming in. This isn't classified stuff, guys. And then just do basic calculations. You know, a lot of intelligence is just common sense and science. And the airplane is known. The Department of Defense has talked about it. The Air Force has it. So if you do all those calculations, you know that we could take that airplane, bring it over here, and we can get the highest resolution photographs possible of that Chinese spy balloon. But we didn't. Why? Because we know what it is. They're saying, well, the pilots went up there and did a drive-by, but they're going 300 miles an hour and you couldn't see anything. Yeah. No. Why are you using a pilot and eyeballs? Why aren't you taking, if you're really concerned about it, collect the intelligence? It could have been a SIGINT platform. It could have been, that means it's got electronics that are what? Emitting signals. So why don't we take an RC-135 and fly it nearby and turn every suite onto that thing and suck the data out of it? Now we have high resolution imagery and a nice signal, you know, the electric signal database, and we can sit there and say what exactly it is. We didn't do any of that. Why? Because we knew all that. We don't want to tell the American people what we know about this balloon, because we know everything about this balloon. If we didn't know anything about the balloon, then it's dereliction of duty not to have done what I just said before you shot it down. You need to collect the data. The reason why we didn't collect the data is we know everything about the balloon. This was purely political theater. And again, the taxpayers should thank the government for wasting millions of dollars for what? To create a threat out of nothing? Because that's what they did. They created a threat out of nothing.
Well, I think they want to distract people from what's really going on. You know, like I said, Nord Stream destruction, brink of World War III. You know, you have trains derailing across the United States. I think they wanted to distract from that. One more thought that I had is, you know, if you were trying to infiltrate American airspace with any aircraft, even a balloon, I think the worst area to come in would be Alaska. Wouldn't you agree? Isn't a great deal of our missile and defense and identification infrastructure set up there towards Russia?
Well, I mean, what were they trying to do? Stealth the balloon in through Alaska, over Canada, down to the missile fields?
Right.
No, like this is just absurdity. I mean,
yes.
You know, there's just nobody with a functioning brain could believe any of this nonsense. Literally nobody.
That's exactly what I've told people. What do you make of the other objects that they shot down in recent days over Canada?
I don't know what to make of it. I mean, they shot it down. They can't find it. Again, guys, before you shoot it down, take a picture. Take a picture of it. But they didn't want to take a picture because they know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm here to just tell you right now, we know what this stuff is, but they don't want to talk about it because to talk about it has to admit that this is just political theater. And frankly speaking, for the military to be put in this situation it's just downright embarrassing. I mean, you got to obey the lawful orders given to you by civilian leadership. But at some point in time, the general has to say, we ain't shooting that down. I'm not putting a pilot up there. I'm not going to fire a missile at a balloon. No, this is stupid. But we don't have generals that have cojones anymore. We have generals who are political yes men. They want to get the next star. They want to get, you know,
they want to get the job at Lockheed Martin.
They want to rotate in. I mean, they're the guy that used the air-to-air missile against a balloon. Yeah. So now they can go work for Lockheed Martin and market the air-to-air missile that was used against a balloon, as if the rest of the world really cares.
I mean, Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, he was literally on the board of Lockheed Martin.
Raytheon. Yeah.
Of Raytheon. I'm sorry. Yeah. So it's ridiculous. It's just all so ridiculous. I had one more point about this I wanted to make. If they did care about the balloon, if they believed it was a Chinese spy balloon, then shoot it down over the Aleutian Islands, right? There's nobody there. They let it come into the mainland of the United States, and then they shot it down once it went back over the ocean in the east. If you care so much, shoot it down over the Aleutians.
If it was an intelligence collection balloon, We let it complete its mission.
Yes, exactly.
Yay, we're smart.
Yeah. Let's move on to Nord Stream now, as long as you don't have anything more to add to that. There was the recent Seymour Hersh article, obviously, and I think everybody at the brain knew who blew up Nord Stream, but this is sort of the nail in the coffin for the Western story, if you will. He says that the explosives were planted in June during a joint exercise between the U.S. and Norway. What do you make of that? Do you believe this story? Do you think that it is accurate?
Well, let me just start again by, the full disclosure. I'm very good friends with Cy Hersh. We've been friends for a quarter of a century now. So I'm biased. So I'm admitting my bias right up front. But this isn't the bias of somebody who's enamored and blinded and all that. It's the bias of somebody who's watched a legendary investigative journalist ply his trade for a quarter of a century. And I've seen just how professional this guy is. So for Cy Hersh to write an article like this isn't, the act of a desperate young journalist trying to make a name for himself. This is an 85-year-old legend who doesn't really need to be doing this, but felt compelled to do it because the story is so important. And people are talking about his sources. I'm just telling you right now that Cy Hersh, A, has great sources. B, he's the kind of journalist that when you read his reporting, you can't name the source. I have gone through a lot of articles that have come out that are that today written by lesser journalists who piece together a narrative, and I'm reading it going, Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, Lloyd Austin, dude from the Pentagon, and I can name all their sources just by reading it because it becomes so obvious. He's done no effort to disguise these people. Cy Hersh is a success, and people come to him because when he writes his articles, nobody can reverse engineer the article and say, this is your source. And that frustrates the living you-know-what out of people because they're like, well, where's yours? I've been reporting on this. Cy has sources. Those sources are good. Now, we live in the real world. Has Seymour Hersh ever been burned by a source? Yeah, he'll be the first to admit it. But, there's at least two occasions that I know of where Cy had a source. The source was vetted, and Cy ran with the source, and it turned out the source was not telling the truth. So, is it possible that Cy has a source here that is doing this? Possible, but once bitten, twice shy. And so Cy's not the kind of guy to have gone through the experience of having a source burn him just to let that happen again. So he has run all the numbers, all the checks and balances, all the traps on this source. And if he says the source is good, you can take that to the bank. But also understand this. If you think that this article was written with one source, you don't know anything about Cy Hersh or the kind of quality investigative journalism that he does. Again, I don't know who the sources are, how many sources are. I'm just telling you that my experience with Cy Hersh is that he wouldn't have written a story of. Plus, let me just also say this: he's not an amateur. He knew exactly what he was doing writing this story now in the way that he did. He knew that this was going to set off a firestorm. That's why he did it, because he is so outraged by the behavior of the United States government that he felt this story had to be told. And look at the first major interview he did with a German outlet. Why? Because the story of America's betrayal of the German people is literally the story, not of the year, but of the decade. Literally, people, America attacked its ally. America attacked a NATO ally. This is an economic Pearl Harbor. The damage done to the German economy is horrific, and the suffering of the German people is significant. And this is America doing it to an ally. Do you really think after this occurred that NATO has any future viability? Everybody out there, Joe Biden, NATO is a sacred complication. Biden just destroyed NATO. If Germany stays in NATO, it will only do so as a cuckold nation, because Germany no longer has the respect of Europe. Europe has attacked Germany. Europe is literally abusing Germany, and Germany can either accept its role as a abused member, or it can grow a pair, stand up, and say no more. But either way, NATO is fundamentally damaged and probably fatally damaged. The European Union may be fatally damaged. How much trust and confidence can Germany put in its European allies? Because this wasn't just an American unilateral action. According to Cy Hirsch, Norway was played, but also we know that Denmark, Sweden, not Germany, Poland, all of these, maybe Germany too. Who knows? There may have been elements because the United States uses Germany. We may have controlled certain German resources, all to conspire against the German nation. And I think there's a growing recognition in Germany now of just what happened and how bad this is. And this is the importance of the Seymour Hersh story. I mean, there's three aspects to this. One, Joe Biden violated the Constitution of the United States of America with intent. He collaborated with members of his cabinet and others to bypass constitutionally mandated reporting requirements to Congress about acts of war. Because, ladies and gentlemen, blowing up Nord Stream 2 was an act of war.
Yes.
An outright act of war, ecological terrorism. I mean, if any other nation had done this against our infrastructure, we'd have gone to war against them, and we'd be hunting down the people who made that decision. We'd be prosecuting. I can guarantee you they'd be hauled before the Southern District in New York and charged with a litany of charges, including terrorism. So America is a terrorist nation. Straight up. Joe Biden's a war criminal. Straight up. And Congress is doing nothing. Straight up. Which means we are a broken nation. Thank you, Seymour Hersh, for putting that out there so at least we're confronted with it. Yeah. You know, we need to understand what we have become as a nation. Joe Biden is a war criminal. His cabinet is a collection of war criminals who have carried out terroristic acts against an ally, acts of war. We did it. Our Congress is silent, and the American people are doing jack squat about it. You know, see no evil, hear no evil, say no evil. That's what we become. Our symbol, we should take down the American flag and put up the three monkeys, because that's what we are. So that's the one thing. Thank you, Cy, for pointing this out. And the fact that Congress isn't calling for his impeachment is absurd. It's tragic. The second thing, we've talked about Germany, and I won't elaborate it, but the ramifications of what we've done to Germany will haunt us for decades to come. I just think that this is literally the straw that broke the camel's back, and we're going to be watching German disengagement from America. If I were the Germans, in a year's time, there wouldn't be a single American base left on German soil. The relationship is over. I'd be recalling my ambassador. I'd be kicking out the American ambassador, and I would be saying, this is the enemy. So thank you, Cy, for doing that. And again, I think it's telling that he went to a German outlet to do his first major media interview about this. One, because America's ignoring him. I mean, all the media outlets, you know, this is a Pulitzer Prize winning guy. This is the legendary investigative journalist. And the New York Times, the Washington Post, the New Yorker, and everybody's just like, no, Cy, who? What? We don't know. What? There's a story about Norwich? Oh, no, come on, man. No, they're too busy, you know, balloons. Right. You know, so thank you, Cy, for that. But then there's the third part that I think is as important or more important, especially when we're going to talk about Ukraine. If you take a look at the narrative that's put out by the West about Russia's actions in Ukraine, it's an unprovoked act of aggression. That's what it's called. Everybody, unprovoked act of aggression. So now we have we have Joe Biden on February 7th saying straight up, if Russian tanks enter Ukraine, Nord Stream 2 ceases to exist. Straight up. It's a confession beforehand. Straight intent. I'm going to destroy Nord Stream 2. You even had a German journalist. But how could you do that? It's German. Don't worry, it's going to be done. It proves he doesn't care about Germany. I mean, straight up, he said, I don't care that it's German. I'm going to do this. Confession. That would hold up in any court of law. Same thing with Victoria Nuland. The same thing with Ted Cruz's fetish about getting rid of Nord Stream 2. It's all there, intent. Then what we do then is we jump straight ahead to September 26th when it blows up. And we go, aha! Biden said if Russia invades, it's going to blow it up. And that's what he did. But let's back up for a second and fill in the rest of the gaps here. Before the Russian invasion, Russia did everything possible to stop this war. And the fact that, American media doesn't want to talk about it doesn't mean it didn't happen. We now have confessions from Petro Poroshenko, Angela Merkel, and Francois Hollande. That's the former president of Ukraine, the former chancellor of Germany, the former president of France. Why are they important? They're the ones who negotiated the Minsk Accords that were supposed to create a ceasefire and create the conditions for conflict termination in the Donbass. Russia, continued to say, we want the Minsk Accords to be implemented. We want them implemented. They pushed that for 8 years. We now know that from the German, the French, and the Ukrainian perspective, it was a sham. They were never serious about it. It was a sham, a ploy to buy time for NATO to train a Ukrainian army capable of evicting Russian forces from the Donbass and destroying the ethnic Russian uprising and to reconquer Crimea. So NATO intended always from the start to use Ukraine as a proxy force to fight Russia. And the Minsk Accords were simply a device to buy time to make that happen. And we know the United States put a military training facility in Western Ukraine in 2015. And every 55 days, we brag about 1 battalion of Ukrainian forces trained to NATO standards, sent east to kill Russians. So, and even when the Minsk Accords collapsed, I mean, Joe Biden met with Vladimir Putin in June of 2021 in Geneva. And first on the agenda was how to stop this war. And Putin said, it's easy. Sign Minsk. Get the Ukrainians to agree to Minsk, and this all goes away. All goes away. But and Biden promised him, but he lied. Because here's the other news flash, ladies and gentlemen. The American government never tells the truth about anything, ever. Whether it's Chinese balloons, whether it's Minsk, whether it's anything, we lie all the time. That's what we do. And Joe Biden lied. He lied to Putin. He lied to the American people because we had no intention of having Minsk implemented. So the Russians, realizing that Minsk was a dead end, then confronted us with draft treaties to have a new European security framework that would terminate any potential conflict. We ignored that. So Russia went in citing preemptive collective self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter because there was 60 to 90,000 NATO-trained Ukrainian forces assembling in eastern Ukraine ready to attack the Donbass, as everybody admits. Everybody admits, even Zelensky in 2019, we will go to war in Donbass. We will go to war in Donbass. So it's not made up. It's all real. So this wasn't an unprovoked act of aggression on the part of Russia. It was legitimate preemptive collective self-defense. But now the war goes on. What did Russia do? And now we have the luxury of looking back on this problem for about a year, because there was a lot of confusion early on in this conflict. People like me believed that Russia was just going to steamroll the Ukrainians, and they would have had they gone in militarily, doctrinally, but they didn't. They did something different. What they were trying to do is pressure Ukraine and bring them to the negotiating table. They weren't trying to occupy Kiev. They weren't trying to, conquer the country. It was to put pressure on Kiev to get them to the negotiating table. And it succeeded. There were 3, negotiations in early March that led to a gathering in Istanbul on 1 April, where there was a treaty that Ukraine and Russia, at least Russia, was prepared to sign, bringing an end to this conflict. But then Boris Johnson steps in and shuts it down. And he did so with the permission of the United States. You see, we didn't want peace. I mean, today we're all talking about there has to be a negotiated settlement. Well, on April 1st, there was a negotiated settlement. Russia and Ukraine were ready to end this conflict, but we killed it. And now it turns out the Ukrainians were never serious either. We know from the head of the Ukrainian intelligence service that the negotiations themselves were a sham to buy time. Why would we kill it if our goal was to have a negotiated settlement? Now we have to go back to February 7th. If Russian tanks go into Ukraine, Nord Stream will be destroyed. That's Joe Biden's promise. Well, Russian tanks went in, but on April 1st, they were getting ready to negotiate it into this conflict, which means once the conflict ends, the United States loses its pretext for taking out Nord Stream, which of course was a major political objective in this whole thing. If people think this is only about Ukraine, you're so wrong. This is about the United States imposing its control over the German economy and the European economy. And you do that by shutting down cheap Russian gas so that they are compelled to buy expensive American liquid natural gas. This is about transitioning American energy into the European market. And you do that by eliminating your competitor, but they hadn't yet accomplished that task. They hadn't yet blown up the pipeline. So you can't have peace. And this makes what Biden did even more nefarious, because now the blood of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers, thousands of Ukrainian civilians, the destruction of nation is solely on his hand. Stop blaming Vladimir Putin. This is a war that Putin did not want. This is a war that the United States did want. And one of the reasons why they wanted this war is that it provided political cover for the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines that allowed the United States to assert its economic and energy security control over Europe. So on September 26th, when they blew up the pipelines, mission accomplished. An act of war against Germany, which was always the intention. And this is another thing for the Germans to reflect on, that this wasn't some accident, circumstances require unfortunate circumstances. No, the United States was planning from day one to take out this pipeline and destroy your country. And they were using the Ukrainian conflict, which we facilitated, we made. We wanted that war. Russia did not want that war. We wanted that war. We engaged in that war to, one, undermine Russia, weaken Russia, but also weaken Germany. This is about America's coup d'etat in Europe, to solidify Europe, create an American, umbrella of control before we pivot to China. That means that Germany was seen as every much an enemy as Russia. And ask you this, how many times did the United States attack Russia in the last year? None. How many times we attacked Germany? Well, we got them good. So the only country we've attacked in this whole thing is Germany. And people need to reflect on that, because this incident that's that's been highlighted by Seymour Hersh's outstanding reporting it condemns America. I mean, if there was ever a Nuremberg tribunal, we'd have a whole host of people hauled up there for crimes against humanity. And some of them should be hung by the neck until dead.
I agree with you on that, even though we might get kicked off of YouTube for saying it. But I do just want to add that the U.S. hasn't directly attacked Russia, but I would say that sending $100 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine is very close to actually attacking.
Oh, no. I'm not downplaying what we've done. I'm just saying that
sanctions
physically we attacked Germany.
Yeah, it's an act of war against Germany. I believe it was the first head of NATO. I forget his name. He said that the entire reason that NATO exists is to keep the
Lord Ismay.
Is that his name? Yeah. He said the entire reason the NATO exists is to keep the Americans in, the Germans down, and the Russians out. And that's exactly what's happening. They're keeping Germany down. Germany and Russia are like trading partners made in heaven. Russia has all the resources, all the oil. Germany has production capacity. They need the resources and they need the electricity. If Germany and Russia partnered up, they would be a very, very unstoppable duo. And the United States and the West, they've realized that for centuries. That's why they sent Hitler after Russia to start, right? Because they didn't want Russia and Germany coming together. I mean, before the start of World War II, Germany had the second largest socialist party in the world outside of Russia, So they were very close to becoming friendly with Russia, and the U.S. could just not have that. But yes, it's an act of war against Germany, like you're saying. We now have NATO leadership. Stoltenberg, he had a press conference a couple days ago, and he said, what did he say? He said that that NATO will be starting to look at underwater infrastructure, protecting underwater infrastructure after the devastating attacks on Nord Stream. It's just so it's so crazy. It's hypocritical. So we know who did it. We know the United States blew up Nord Stream. The head of NATO blew up Nord Stream. But now NATO is going to invest all this money to protect underwater infrastructure. From who? From the United States? From NATO? Who are you protecting it from?
This is like the Jesse and Frank James, the famous train robbers. This would be the equivalent of them after taking down a number of Union Pacific trains, coming up and saying, we're going to organize a committee to study train security and how to prevent robberies against trains. So the train robber is going to have a committee to discuss how to prevent robbing trains.
Yeah,
and that's Stoltenberg and the United. We're now going to take a look at underwater security. Really? Do you really think anybody's buying into this? I mean, it's at some point in time, it's like a bad Monty Python skit. I just keep feeling like I'm looking at outtakes going, it should be funny, but it's not funny because you got a bad actor up there. But try again, guys. But tweak it a little bit harder. Let's get some Monty Python, Search for the Holy Grail type stuff in here. But it's not real. It's a parody. I mean, it's a joke. This guy gets up there, and I don't like making fun of people's physical appearance because you don't know. But I mean, his whole approach and the way he talks, it's almost like it's done on purpose to look foolish. And then you match his physical presentation with the actual, content of the words he's speaking, and it's absurd. It's literally the theater of the absurd.
Are you talking about Stoltenberg or Biden?
Stoltenberg right now, but
I guess they're both.
Biden, I just think that what we're doing here right now is cruelty to the elder. This man should not be.
I've thought that too. I don't. Joe Biden is not a person to feel much empathy for. But
nope. Not at all.
I watched him go up there, and it's clear he's not there. I've had older family members that have dementia and things. It's clear that he's on that path.
There's something going on here.
Yes,
it's not good. It's not only bad for him, but it's bad for the country.
Yeah. I look at these leaders we have in the West. We have Joe Biden. You could say Stoltenberg, Macron, the carousel of UK prime ministers, whether it's Boris Johnson or what was the woman's name? I'm drawing a blank.
Elizabeth Truss.
Yeah, Truss. And now you have Sunak, and Sunak's a billionaire investment banker who likes to have cocaine field parties.
Whose wife apparently is heavily invested in Russia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, her company is heavily invested in Russia and not affected at all by the sanctions. So he is literally a walking, talking hypocrisy machine.
Yeah, but my point is our leaders in the West are clowns. You know what I mean? They're literally they're goons, they're mobsters essentially. And we're supposed to believe that, Putin is a goon. We're supposed to look at Putin, and we're supposed to look at Xi in China, and we're supposed to say, oh, they're crazy authoritarian dictators who don't care about the people. Well, China has raised hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, right? Putin has brought Russian living standards way back up since he's come to power. What have American leaders done? What have Western leaders done? The complete opposite, right? Right?
Destroy the country.
Our living standards have gone down. We have trains derailing and poisoning fish in the Ohio River. It's complete nonsense. It's the complete other way around. But yeah, I wanted to move on to Ukraine now, and I heard there were some missile strikes last night. I didn't see too much information on them. Do you know anything about the missile strikes?
I just know that there's reports of significant missile strikes throughout Ukraine. Look, this is going to be the norm going forward.
Yeah.
It's tragic to watch, but we're watching the literal destruction of a modern nation state. Again, we claim to be their friends, but we've literally put in motion events that are leading to the destruction of Ukraine as a modern nation state, and we're just sitting there. There's nothing we can do, but nothing we want to do. Yeah. We're not their friends. I mean, at some point, the Ukrainians are going to have that moment where they go, we don't have any friends. I mean, actually, to be honest, the greatest friend Ukraine has, and I say this with all sincerity, is Russia.
Yeah,
because it's the only country that cares about Ukraine. It's the only one that cares about Ukraine.
Putin has always referred to, especially before the start of the invasion operation, whatever you want to call it, Putin always spoke of Ukraine as a fraternal nation, as a brotherly nation. And, so they don't want to destroy Ukraine, or they don't want to kill the people. You know what I mean?
They're given no choice, though, because it's now no longer a conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine was going to be over on April 1st.
Right.
With minimal damage to Ukraine.
Yeah.
Minimal losses. A negotiated settlement that met Russia's criterion for a sphere of influence and, for a European security framework. That's all Russia wanted out of this. They didn't want to destroy NATO, capture Europe. They just wanted peace. That would have happened. But now this conflict has become between Russia and the collective West, where Ukraine is used as a prize. I always, I'll just bring this up because I think it's funny. I've been singled out by the Center for Countering Disinformation, which is a U.S. funded organization working for the Ukrainian president. It's put out a list, the blacklist, they call it, and I feature prominently. In fact, I oftentimes show up as the person of the week or the person of the day in terms of the worst enemy to Ukraine in terms of Russian propaganda.
Wow.
And so I'm a Russian propagandist, I'm an information terrorist, and I'm a war criminal who deserves to be arrested and prosecuted as the same you would a terrorist who attacked, infrastructure violently. And the number one crime that I was accused of by them was that I dared say that Russia is engaged in a proxy conflict with NATO and that Ukraine is a NATO proxy. They said, my God, that's not the case. You are a criminal for saying this. You're the worst person in the world. And yet the Ukrainian defense minister came out late last year and said, yeah, Ukraine is a NATO proxy fighting Russia, and we need more weapons. You need to, we're willing to give the bodies, but you have to give the guns. It's the same thing I said, but he's saying it now in November, December. I was saying it in March. So I look forward to them publishing a new blacklist updated that has the Ukrainian Minister of Defense right next to me because we're guilty of the same sin. Except I was telling the truth long before he did. But that's where we're at right now. It's again, the theater of the absurd. Truth isn't. We don't want the truth. We just tell lies.
Yes, you're 100% right about that. Our government is the worst government in the world. There's no doubt about that, really. My next thought is just, I hope the people of Taiwan are watching this conflict in Ukraine and understanding that, this will happen to you if you continue to let the United States control you and take away your sovereignty. And that's what the U.S. does, right? They take away sovereignty. They take away the sovereignty of Germany, of most of Europe, Japan, South Korea, and now look, South Korea is always on a war footing with North Korea. Japan is always on a war footing. If you're friends, so-called friends with the United States, they put you on a war footing, that you're going to go to war if you are friends with the United States.
I think people need to understand that the rules-based international order that the Biden administration, indeed multiple U.S. administrations are touting as the most important thing, is a mechanism of control, American control of all those who buy into the rules-based international order, whether it's through IMF loans, whether it's through the World Bank, whether it's through the SWIFT bank communication. There's this huge economic web of control that the United States is, asserting on the world, and the situation's become such. I mean, when we speak of the economy of the United States, we can't, separate it from the military-industrial complex that Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address in 1961, where he said, this is becoming a power in its own right, and when we marry it with Congress and funding, it becomes a permanent, unelected reality that's going to dominate, meaning that defense, because we are so dependent on defense spending, we need to have a continuous state of conflict in the world to justify the defense spending. So if you want to be an American ally and part of the international rules-based order, what you're buying into is being a tool of America to create continuous conflict. And our genius is that we don't suffer from these conflicts. Look at Ukraine. America's not suffering. In fact, everything's coming up roses for us economically. We've taken over Germany's economy. We've destroyed that. We're crushing the European economy. We're making them buy our liquid natural gas, so we're making record profits. We're stripping factories away, jobs away. We're the benefit. So we are literally the colonial master of a colonized world that has to bow to us and continue to support us. And hopefully people will wake up. This is why Russia and China say that they reject the rules-based international order in its totality. They want the law-based international order. And that's the last thing we want, because we break the law every single day. We have no legal right in the framework of international law to sanction anybody because they touched the SWIFT system. That's an illegal unilateral action by the United States based upon the dominance of the dollar globally and its status as a reserve currency. We've taken the world's economy hostage by the petrodollar, by the reserve currency. Well, people are basically starting to say, we don't want to be hostages anymore. And, it's starting to unravel. But the rules-based international order is, it's literally it's a violation of international law. It's the personification of illegality, and yet that's how the United States chooses to promote its interaction with the world today.
Yeah, well, to them it's normal, right? To them, the whole world is just As Joseph Borrell, I believe, said from the EU, he said the world is a jungle and Europe is a garden, right? And the garden has to keep the jungle in check. And it's an insane mindset. It's something you'd hear from, it's something you'd hear from Hitler, or it's something you'd hear from King Leopold from Belgium. It's an insane mindset. I can't believe it still exists within, the
I mean, that's up there with Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake.
Yes.
Okay, well, guess what? There goes your head. And I'm not promoting violence, but hey, Burrell, you're not a good guy.
No.
You're not, and you're not even that smart. Nobody's sitting there.
None of them are.
No, none of them are. But that's the point. You see, the United States doesn't want smart people to rise into leader. If you take a look, you brought it up earlier. Emmanuel Macron, really? Justin Trudeau, huh?
Yeah.
Schultz, what? We can go on and on. None of them are the best and brightest from their respective countries, but they rise up through the system that is defined by the rules-based international order. The rules-based international order isn't designed to promote intelligent, independent thinking leaders. It's designed to promote minions. And that's what you get. You get minions whose sole purpose isn't to help their people, but to ensure that what they do conforms with the rules-based international order for the sole benefit of the United States.
And I think it's important to point out that rules-based international order is set and carried out for, that's not just the United States government. It's carried out for the corporations. What do you agree? The big major oil companies, the military-industrial complex, pharmaceuticals.
The deep state.
The deep state, exactly, right.
Not allowed to say that because that's conspiracy, but
right.
It exists.
Yeah, of course it exists. I can't think of a single Western leader that I respect. Can you? Is there a single one?
No, and they all pale in comparison. Again, I get accused of, back when we were going to war with Iraq.
The first time?
I viewed Saddam Hussein as one of the few rational voices. He was somebody that could actually think rationally. Nobody talks about how he got in the situation that he was. I mean, start with the premise that Iraq was a fake state, cobbled together by Western leaders who drew arbitrary lines on a map in post-Ottoman Empire in an effort to take a Hashemite king and give him an Arab territory. But they weren't thinking. It was like, oh look, Kurds. Oh look, Shia, and we're going to take a Sunni tribal minority and empower them. It was a fake state that was designed to fall apart on its own volition. And yet Saddam Hussein came in and said, I'm going to try and make it a real state. Yeah. And he was working in that direction. I'm not sitting here saying the Ba'athist ideology is wonderful. It's not. But for Iraq, it was probably the only way that you could begin to unite this nation. And he lived in a very difficult region. Iran was bullying him with the United States permission. The Kurds were rising up with the CIA's permission. So there was just issues all over the place. He did what he did, but he's not perfect. But this was literally the only person that understood the issues and could think through rationally how to avoid the conflict the United States ended getting itself into. But you can't say that. You can't speak realistically about Saddam Hussein. He was the personification of evil, the most evil man in the world, the modern day equivalent of Adolf Hitler, according to George H.W. Bush. Now we look at Vladimir Putin. He's literally the savior of Russia. My God, Russian people, fall on your knees and thank the Lord above, or whatever deity that you embrace, that you got a Vladimir Putin when you got him, because Boris Yeltsin had spent a decade colluding with the United States and others to destroy Russia, to bring Russia down, to keep Russia down. And Vladimir Putin came in and said no, and he brought it up. Is his tactics perfect? I don't know. They worked. And Russia is a thriving state today with a lot of freedoms and values that we ignore in the West. One of the great freedoms is, the freedom of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Where have we heard that one before? In Russia today, you don't have the same homeless problem you have. Russian workers get a decent salary. They have guaranteed, homes. It's a constitutional right to have a home. Walk through Moscow. It's clean. There's not violent crime breaking out all over the place. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. Yes. And the Russians have him to thank, and they have him to thank for, making Russia operate within the limits of what Russia should be. He's not seeking to be a global superpower. He's simply saying that Russia is a power, a great power, and deserves to sit at the table with other great powers so that the world, so they can figure out how to make the world a better place to live for all people. But we don't want to hear that, because the second you do that, you compare and contrast him with the Western leaders. They shouldn't even be shining his shoes, let alone coming into the same room with him and treating him as an equal. The United States, the office of the presidency it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So the office of the presidency should always be treated with respect and even some deference by global leaders. But we've put occupants into the office of the presidency that disgrace it, that embarrass it, that humiliate it. And it's losing its, how can you treat the office of the presidency seriously with Joe Biden in there right now? Because he's, at some point in time when he was younger, his brain worked. You can disagree with what came out of his mouth, but his brain worked and he was pretty sharp. He could, he had the gift of gab. Yeah. So, he could get up there and do the whole shuckster thing and fake people out. But today it's done. The brain is shutting down. It's an embarrassment, a literal embarrassment that we've allowed our nation to be defined by a man that has advancing dementia.
Yeah.
And so Biden's probably the best Western leader out there, because nobody else should even be invited into the White House to take out the trash. That's how bad they are. Then you have Vladimir Putin. You have Xi Jinping. Quit calling the guy. I hate when people go, well, he's a Chinese communist. Yeah. Joe Biden's an American Democrat. But now let's talk about quality of leadership. Hey, how many Americans are there? 340 million now? We're getting up in that number.
About, yeah.
Do people know that China's run 3 successive, economic campaigns designed, each one, to raise 300,000 Chinese out of poverty into middle class? They've done it 3 times. 3 times China has run a campaign to get the population of the United States out of poverty into middle class, and they've succeeded. That doesn't happen on a whim. That requires leadership. That requires a man who can take a country with all the complex problems of China and manage these problems so that they don't sink the ship, and not only keep the ship afloat, but turn it into the kind of Carnival cruise liner that everybody wants to be a part of. Everybody wants to be on that cruise. It's a cool cruise. Land at JFK. Just do it, please, people. Go abroad, then come back to America and go through JFK.
I've been to JFK.
If you're not embarrassed, then I don't know what. Look at the decaying infrastructure of the United States, one of its greatest cities, New York City. Decaying infrastructure, a travesty. Now fly to Shanghai. All right. Look at the airport you land in, and then get on a train, a high-speed train. There's lots of them in China, and travel around. And you're sitting there going, my God, not only is it high-quality infrastructure, but it works. Trains are on time. Everything's clean. I'm not saying China's perfect. It's not. But let's stop denigrating it and downplaying it because they're communists. They're doing a very good job in dealing with the cards that they have been dealt. And China today is a global superpower that surpasses our influence and our impact on the world on many different levels, to include the economy. Biden was leading the Build Back Better World plan. That's the thing he was trying to sell to the G7 last summer. And the big thing there is that they had to challenge the Chinese in their Belts and Roads initiative. Okay, how are you going to do that? $600 billion. Now, it's not all American money. It's not even real money. We're going to put up $300 billion and hope that businesses kick in another $300 billion, and we're going to change the world. Well, wait a minute. It's all theoretical. Hasn't happened. And you're going up against the Chinese, who, in the course of the past decade, have invested between $7 and $10 trillion in global infrastructure development. You are so far behind. This is like entering a marathon, and your opponent is at has just crossed the 20th mile, literally on the down slope to win the race. And we're going to start the marathon now and actually think we're going to catch up and beat them.
Right.
Ain't going to happen, guys. The Chinese are so far ahead of us in terms of their imprint on the global economy and their control of global supply chains. And this is something America should focus on. One of the reasons why we're losing the Russian campaign, the against Russia, is that we fundamentally we had no understanding of the Russian economy and the role that energy security plays in the Russian economy. We denigrated. I mean, again, Americans are great with one-liners. Russia's nothing more than a gas station disguised as a nation. How many times do you hear that? Over and over again. Oh, they got energy. You take that away, they got nothing. Okay, well, try and take it away. You can't. Why? Because Russians know energy better than we do. And Russia knows the global energy markets better than we do. And Russia also, being a major energy producer, can make alliances with other major energy producers who are saying, hey, if we let them get away with constraining Russia's economy by attacking the energy sector, what happens when they get mad at us? And so Russia has outplayed the United States. We put the most stringent economic sanctions package in the world on Russia, designed to cripple their economy. Even the Russian leadership was saying that they thought that they were going to have 20 to 25% contraction of their economy. It contracted. I think the number ended up being around 2.2%, and next year it's actually going to grow. And think about that. What I'm saying, a nation that has been hit with the most stringent economic sanctions in the world by the world's largest economic powers, that's at war, in a very expensive war, having its energy curtailed, is going to grow. Their economy is going to grow next year. And that's amazing. People have said that Russia is going to have funding problems. Really? I don't know. Maybe you should study the Russian economy, because again, with all this war, with all these competing requirements on the budget, the war, sanctions, the whole thing, why did Russia run a surplus? A surplus. I mean, in America, when we go to war, we are running massive deficits. Anytime we do something major, massive deficit. We don't know how to run a surplus anymore. Russia, with all of the issues that came in, ran a $38 billion surplus last year, and that surplus will probably grow even more. We don't understand Russia, therefore we can't control Russia, we can't contain Russia. And I would say we don't understand China as well. We need to understand that as bad as we got the Russian energy security equation, we will fail on the global supply chain equation. You want to destroy the American economy? Try to go to war with China and then say, we're going to sanction you. That is going to backfire so poorly, because we are totally dependent upon a Chinese-dominated global supply chain. And they will shut this thing down. And the other thing is, by advertising what we're going to do, because that's the arrogance of the United States. We told the Russians exactly what we were going to do. It's not like Putin went, oh, I don't believe him. You don't think they're going to do that, do you? No. Okay, let's just keep doing things as normal. And I don't think they're going to do that. Putin went, I think they're going to do that. So what do we have to do to be prepared? What strategies we have to be placed? And the Russians have some of the, to denigrate Russia as this nation of robots ruled by a singular dictator is absurd. Putin has at his disposal some of the greatest brains in the world, people who actually know Russia and the world, and because they operate on the foundation of reality, not arrogance. They don't believe in Russian manifest destiny, where God has touched them and said, you get to rule the world. They believe in pragmatism, realities. And so they looked around and said, what do we have to do? What changes do we have to make? And they did it, and they beat us. China right now is hearing the United States keep talking about how we're going to do this, that, and the other thing. And the Chinese are like, all right, if we go against Taiwan, what do you think America is going to do economically? This, that, and the other thing. Okay, what are our plans to block them? What's plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D? They've got all the options figured out. So when it happens, they will be able to not only initiate an effective economic counterattack, but they will have the ability to adapt as we try to adapt. And at the end of the day, America will lose, because we're not that good anymore, guys. We are literally not that good. We're big, and we have a lot of momentum carrying, with us from the past, but we're not that good. And the world is just sidestepping the momentum, and it's going to be game, set, match world against us if we're not careful. But in order to be careful, we have to have leaders that are willing to accept the reality of our present situation. But we don't. We have leaders that are addicted to 3 words. You ready? USA, USA, USA. These are political leaders that love to hear this nonsense, love to have their crowds chanting this, But those are empty words. What is USA? What is the United States of America anymore? What do we stand for? And now we're getting, my standard thing. It's about the Constitution, baby. That's all we are. The thing that unites us all is a document, a singular document, the Constitution of the United States, and the principles, values that are enshrined in that document. And I will challenge your listeners right now. You probably have an intelligent group of listeners, but take a test on the Constitution and tell me if you're going to pass it. What test do you say, Scott? Why don't you take the test that every immigrant who comes to the United States who wants to be an American citizen has to take? Just a basic, straight up test of the Constitution. They have to get it all right.
100%.
And a lot of them do. Imagine if every year you had to recertify to be an American. Oh, time to come in. It's like getting your vehicle inspected. We're going to get your citizenship inspected today. Oh, okay. Here's your 10 questions on the Constitution. Scott, you only got 2 of them right. You've lost your citizenship. Wouldn't that be a challenge where Americans had to know the Constitution to maintain their citizenship? But we, of course, are born in the country. The Constitution says we are citizens, and therefore we're allowed to be ignorant. Okay. I mean, I guess ignorance is a constitutional right. We can't compel you to be smart, but understand what it means when you're ignorant about the one thing that defines who we are and what we are as a nation. That means that you are no longer cognizant of what you're supposed to be defending. Therefore, when you elect people to higher office and they do things that deviate from the Constitution, like attacking Germany without notifying Congress, you don't realize what a big deal that is. And so we stop being the nation that our founding fathers envisioned when they put together the Constitution, and we become something different. We claim to be this, but in reality, we're that. And that's where we are today, ladies and gentlemen. Our country is adrift away from the values we claim to have embraced, and we're becoming that which we should condemn. In short, any nation that will conspire to attack an ally for the purpose of hurting its people and its economy so that we can dominate, that is evil. That's not reality. That's not real politics. That's evil. Evil. Joe Biden is an evil president. His administration is an evil administration. And this country, because we are doing nothing about it, is an evil nation. That means that we are all evil people. We are citizens who deserve the world's disdain, even hatred, because we're the worst thing that's happened to the world right now. We are the problem. We aren't the solution.
I completely agree. I don't think it's the people of the United States that are evil. I think most of the people of the United States, they go to work, they make just enough money to live their lives. They don't have time to get educated on these topics. So I don't think they're the ones that are evil.
Good Americans, like good Germans, I don't buy into it. I'm sorry. I condemn the German people for allowing Adolf Hitler's rise.
Yeah.
They could have done more. I know life is tough, especially in Weimar Republic. Their economic problems make what we suffer today, and many Americans have, they pale in comparison. Yeah. But no, there's no such thing as a good German. All Germans, except the ones that actually went out there and did something, got arrested, put in concentration camps, and were executed. The Germans who simply did their job, got up in the morning, went to work, came home, kissed their wives, raised their children, and all that, they were the problem because they were the ones who should have stopped Adolf Hitler. So the American people who get up in the morning, go to work, come home, kiss their wives, kiss their husbands, raise the children, they're the problem. Because in a nation that begins the preamble, we the people of the United States, what does that mean? We the people of the United States. So let's own that statement, which means we the people of the United States are responsible for everything that happens in this country. And it's not good citizenship to say it's too hard. Good citizenship is meant to be hard. It's not meant to be easy. And if you choose the easy way out, you are facilitating evil. You are literally conspiring with evil, and that makes you evil. So yeah, I know what you're saying, Bradley. My heart goes out to my fellow Americans too, but I'm not giving anybody a pass anymore. None, zero, no passes.
I understand. I think that the American people, they're so propagandized. You know, they get on TikTok, they get on Instagram, they get on social media, they turn on the TV, and everything they see, it's, oh, Russia is horrible, China is horrible, North Korea wants to kill you, they all want to kill you. and we're the only people that can save you. So, if that's all they're seeing, what do you expect them to think? You know what I mean? And I get what you're saying. They need to branch out. They need to educate themselves. And
Well, let's look at it this way. You've got behind you Kansas City Chief thing, so you're a fan.
Yes.
I mean, did you know about Patrick Mahomes? Did you know his statistics? Could you sit there and talk about how good a quarterback he was on the 3rd and something situation? How did you know that? I mean, I'm not blaming you, but did you play fantasy football? Were you in a fantasy football league? All right. And any Americans in a fantasy football league, I guarantee you spend hours a week going through statistics to make sure that you pick the right players for your team, because it's all about performance. And that performance is based on actuarial tables that you modify because you are a concerned fan, you are engaged, you are committed to winning fantasy football. And I'm not condemning people who do that. I'm just pointing out that you are willing to put a hell of a lot of effort into fantasy football and then say, I don't have time to understand about this whole world stuff. No. You opted out of reality, and opted into fantasy. And that's my whole thing. I mean, if literally you wake up in the morning, look, I'm going to be the first one to admit this is hard. Look, Bradley, and I know you're smart. Just on your questions alone, I know you spend time studying this, so I'm not picking on you. It's okay to, do fantasy football. I read books for fun sometimes because I need to get the hell away from all this other crap. My kids turned me on to World of Warcraft. I don't play it much anymore, but sometimes if I got an hour or two, I'll go in there and disappear into that stupid game because you need to unplug from the insanity, from the madness. I wake up in the morning and I go to bed at night, and all I do is this: study this stuff, talk about it, write about it. And it's a full-time job, and it's more than a full-time job because I'm putting in hours that would just blind people. And I still get it wrong. It's still hard for me. So I'm not sitting here saying this is going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. But when we're talking about our nation, if we're talking about the direction our nation is heading, then we need to reprioritize. And that's the thing about a team. Let's say that that Scott Ritter had a team, and I do. I have a team that helps me. I do podcasts, and I'm helped by the fact that I have a good friend, Jeff Norman, who actually takes over the technical stuff, because there wouldn't be a podcast without him. Otherwise, you'd have some old idiot sitting there staring into a camera trying to figure out how to log into Zoom. So I get that help. I have editors who help me publish things. So there is a team. But if I had an even bigger team, let's say I was Fareed Zakaria with all his CNN staff, my life would become simple because I could then delegate things. I could have people read things for me and do up little synopsis and come to me and all this stuff. And I could bring this under control. Americans need to start building teams. This is why community groups are good. Look, and we know how to do this. If you want to, we have a thing going on here in Bethlehem where we're trying to stop, development that's going to increase traffic on roads where our children play and where our animals are. And we just don't want, a 60% increase in vehicular traffic because somebody's going to get hit by a car, somebody's going to get killed, and the quality of life diminishes. But if you're one person trying to fight that, you can't. But you come together as a citizen action group, and you spread load. You get people doing different things. You coordinate with one another. Next thing you know, you're starting to have a meaningful impact. You can do that with other things. But we have to organize as concerned citizens, and that's where I think people think this is too hard, so they unplug. And it's very easy to unplug in America because the system is designed to dumb you down. The system's designed to put you in front of a TV set with a remote that allows you to do anything you want to do in front of the TV set. The system's designed to put you in front of a computer or in front of a smartphone and just have you scroll all day. And that's the system's designed to dumb you down. Yeah. And why? Because the system doesn't want you to be a good citizen. The greatest threat to present day America is the concerned citizen, the intelligent citizen, the informed citizen, the activist citizen. That's the greatest threat to the establishment, but it's the only thing that'll save this country.
Yeah, you're completely correct, and that's why people like you. I don't know if you're familiar with Caleb Maupin, but he's a journalist, and he's also on that same list as that you
Yeah.
were put on, and you know that they push people like you down. They cancel you. They call you racist. They call you, they talk about your past legal troubles and try to
Oh,
use that as
yeah.
yeah. They try to
It's
use it.
water off a duck's back now, man. I mean, I've had to learn to stop getting angry about it, because
Yeah.
then all you do is spend your whole life, furious.
Yeah, man, and that's what they want to do. They want to make you angry. But you talk about the system, the TV, the media. It's not just that. Look at the food that we feed people in the United States. It's full of sugar. It's full of all these terrible seed oils. I mean, that we know that these things hurt your brain. We know that it causes ADHD, and we know that it causes all of those things. So they're trying to keep us down on every level. I wanted to go back to a little bit ago. You mentioned Saddam Hussein and whatnot, and Saddam obviously was not a amazing human being. He wasn't the best guy, but like you were saying, living standards in Iraq or Iraq were increasing when Saddam Hussein was in charge. Their currency was increasing. The livelihood of the Iraqi people was going up, and the U.S. just couldn't have that. And George W. Bush, I actually met George W. Bush when I was like 5 years old. I don't really remember it. He went to some event that I was at. I think I shook his hand, and later on, I was 5, but later on in like 2008, I remember I always watched military documentaries, especially World War II. So I'd watch the military channel. And in 2008, it was McCain and Obama running against each other. And my dad voted for John McCain. So I was like all bought in on John McCain, trying to go for John McCain. And it's just funny to think that back then I knew nothing. I was 8 years old or whatever. And but I've really come a long way from thinking I like John McCain to realize John McCain is a criminal of the highest degree. You know what I mean?
My question to you, though, Bradley, is
Yeah.
have you washed that hand yet?
What do you mean?
The one that shook George W. Bush?
Oh,
Have
yes.
you watched it, or is it,
many times. At the time, I thought it was very cool. I thought, oh my God, I just shook the president's hand. How
Why
cool.
not? It's the president of the United States.
Yeah.
It's the office of the presidency. It's supposed to be held in high regard.
Yeah.
So who wouldn't want to shake the president's hand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, today, me.
I don't think I could be around Biden and not be and be friendly to him. I wanted to talk about the tanks that recently got sent to Ukraine. I know that's a bit of old news. Many of them won't even be, at least the Abrams tanks won't even be there for a year. And I've heard you make the point that every tank you send to Ukraine, you're just killing 4 more Ukrainians. You're guaranteeing the deaths of 4 more Ukrainians. And, I think that's exactly right. And by the time.
But in this case, it might not be a bad thing because, for instance, in CNN sent a film crew to England where they're training the Ukrainians on the Challenger 2 tank.
Mm.
And, you see the clip that CNN puts out, and it shows these wonderful Ukrainian soldiers backing the tank up, driving the tank out, learning how to maneuver the tank. But there's a clip they didn't show where the soldiers are sitting there, they wave, and then they Sieg Heil.
Really?
Like, they deserve to die. I hope they all die.
Right.
And I mean this in all sincerity. Anybody who has embraced that ideology, I hope you die. And I hope the death is painful. I mean, we can take a Bob Dylan song from Masters of War. I hope you die and I'll spit on your grave. In Germany, they had to put up a letter, a notice in the barracks where the Ukrainian soldiers are being trained on the Leopard 2. And it basically said, to our Ukrainian guests, please don't put iron crosses and Nazi symbols on the tanks while you're in Germany. You can do that when you get back to Ukraine, but don't do it here because it runs afoul of the law.
Right.
Wait a minute. Why are you even training these people then? Especially Germany. For God's sakes, you know who these people are. You know what they are. You know that they're going to bars at night and they're singing the Bandera song. Bandera is our father, Ukraine is our mother, whatever they want to say. These are evil people. And again, I hope that they die because Nazis just don't deserve to live, especially Nazis that are being empowered with Western weaponry.
No, I agree with you. I mean, the people that are being forcibly conscripted in Ukraine, the regular people that are being forced on the street. I don't feel that way about them. I feel very bad for them, and I wish that wasn't happening. But
even Ukrainians who aren't Nazis but are fighting for Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel sorry for them too, because as I said, the Ukrainian military has some of the finest soldiers in the world in it.
Mm.
These are guys who have proven themselves on the battlefield.
Well, they're trained
And
by the U.S., so I'd hope so.
yeah, but the heart is Ukrainian.
Yeah.
And and I've said this, and I'll say now. Let's say the war stopped right now, stopped, and the Ukrainian military collected itself, pivoted west, and marched. They would roll through Poland like a hot knife through butter because Poland can't fight. They would get to Germany, it would be no resistance because the Germans can't fight. There's not a Bundeswehr worthy of the name. They could move on to Paris because the French can't fight. France can't get 50 Leclerc tanks out of the barracks because they're all broken. That's why they only want to give 14, because they're literally giving away 30% of their tanks, their operational tanks, to Ukraine. The British, there's nothing. You can take the entire British military, put it in a soccer stadium, and have 30,000 unsold seats. So, we can, which tells you something, that if the Ukrainians are that good and the Russians are beating them, what's that say about the Russians?
Yeah, of course. This is something that's bothered me for well over a year now. Is the U.S. media, the U.S. government, they try to act like Russia, some pushover country. What? You just had an entire Cold War against them. You're constantly worried about their military. You're constantly trying to counter them.
Well, now the mistake was that for 20 years we stopped worrying about their military, and there's the fatal mistake. General, I think his name's Cavoli. He's the head of the U.S. European Command, the supreme commander of the European forces, spoke in Sweden last month, and he said, "We ain't ready for this. We can't fight this. We cannot fight the war that's being fought in Ukraine right now. It's on a scope and scale that's mind-boggling, and we haven't prepared for it." Because for the last 20 years, the United States and NATO have been focused on Afghanistan, nation building Afghanistan. They've been focused on Iraq. They've been focused on expanding their presence in the Middle East and going to the Pacific. But the last thing they've been focused on is preparing for a large-scale ground combat, a war in Europe against a Russian thing. They've denigrated it. I don't know how many times you hear. Go back and look at the papers. Look at the statements. NATO against a near-peer opponent. A near-peer opponent? You're talking about Russia? Yes, the Russians are near-peer. Oh, no, dude. The Russians are peer. In fact, you're the near-peer. The Russians are superior to you in almost every way, shape, and form. Why? Well, gosh, when the Russians bring a unit out of the barracks, they can bring most of their tanks with them because they maintain them. They work. Again, Germany. You want to send an armored battalion to Lithuania? Never a good idea, given the history, but they did it anyways, the battle group. They had to basically cannibalize all their brigades to get that one battalion up there. There's nothing left. Germany can't get anything out of the barracks right now. The French can't. The British have nothing. The Dutch, nothing. There's nothing in Europe right now. There is no army worthy of the name, and Cavoli acknowledged it. He basically said what they're doing, the intensity of that combat, we would all die within days. One, we don't have enough ammunition. If you're preparing for a war against Russia and you don't understand that the Russians really like artillery and that they're going to be pounding you with tens of thousands of rounds every day, and if you're only prepared to fire 600 rounds back, you're going to lose this equation because you're going to have to up your artillery expenditure, like the Ukrainians had to learn. Now the Ukrainians are firing 8,000 rounds a day, maybe 12. So they're upping their expenditure, but now you have to replenish that, but you haven't prepared for that. Your industry hasn't been producing that. You don't have enough ammunition. And Cavoli said, we're out of ammo. We got nothing. Stoltenberg had to admit, we're out of ammo. We got nothing. On February 14th, the Ukrainians showed up in Ramstein thinking they were going to get tanks and airplanes. And instead we're told, you're going to lose the war. Straight up, you're going to lose the war. And there's nothing we can do to help you. Now, that's not being said in the West, but listen to what we said to them. You're going to run out of ammunition this summer, and there's no ammunition left to give you. There's nothing we can do. You're going to run out of ammunition. Now, if you're fighting a war of this level and intensity, where artillery is one of the key factors of this war, and you're told you're going to run out of artillery ammunition this summer, what does that tell you? You're going to lose this war. And that's what the West has told Ukraine. You're going to lose this war. So now look what's happening. Suddenly people are starting to pull back on the tanks. The Germans, we ain't giving them all those tanks. We're only giving them some of these tanks. Other nations start going, no, we might keep our tanks. Airplanes, we're going to keep our airplanes. We don't have any airplanes to give you. All the promises are dissipating. Why? The war is lost. There's nothing that can be done to change this. Everything you're hearing in the West about or Ukrainian counteroffensive or not, how can you launch a counteroffensive against an army that's bigger than yours now, better than yours, and has significantly more artillery than you when your artillery, no matter how good it is, doesn't have any shells to fire? You can't. The war is over.
Yeah. Can you explain the role of the tank in modern warfare? It seems like it's changed from the past of World War II and whatnot. They seem to operate a very different manner now.
Yeah, when tanks first came out, it was advantage tank. It was they were difficult to kill. Generally, the best anti-tank weapon was another tank, and so you could have these giant battles of maneuver with the tanks playing a dominant role. As technology developed, we started to get these anti-tank missiles that were pretty good. But then you have a technology base. Can this warhead penetrate this armor, then make this armor better? Boom, etc. Then tactics evolved, because now instead of the tanks going hey diddle diddle straight up the middle, they have to be accompanied by infantry fighting vehicles that have the ability to suppress these other infantry units with anti-tank rounds. So the tank can focus on the tank, infantry's focus on the infantry. It changes the nature of battle. It actually makes it more complex. Combined arms fighting. You have to bring in artillery, and you have to do everything in a coordinated fashion. But today, the lethality of weapons that can kill tanks is real. I mean, and so the idea of swarming a defense with armor is just an outdated tactic. So tanks still have a role. We see tanks playing a role, but the big aero advances that existed in World War II probably aren't going to happen because of the ability to build defenses in depth that can absorb an armor attack and deplete it before it gets through. So tanks now are part of the meat grinder thing. They come up, they provide limited fire support with infantry support, and then they pull back. Artillery hits, they come up again, grind away, pull back, boom. And that's where tanks are. So tactics have changed. The nature of war has changed, and again, I think Russia's mastered this technique. Take a look at the United States. So what are we going to do with tanks? We're going to go back to Desert Storm, where we get our company, and it's going to go in the staggered configuration with all tank going out this way, advancing, and then it's going to run into an ambush, and they're all going to die because they're using outdated tactics. The United States hasn't fought, again, anything that resembles what's going on in Ukraine. We're just not familiar. Now, hopefully we have people studying it, but again, we're studying it from a position of arrogance, because you just take a look at the conclusions. The Russians are inept, the Russians are this, the Russians are that. So if you don't respect the Russians, therefore you're going to be a detractor of their tactics. Without, what you should be saying is, Russians are pretty damn good, and look what they've done. They've adapted to a new tactical approach to war that takes into account the technologies of death that have been brought to bear. And maybe we might want to pay attention to that, because if we come in with our tactics that have a direct lineage to World War II, we're all going to die.
It's so funny to me. We've heard Western nations, Europe, NATO, we've heard them talk about how Russia wants to take over Europe. They want to come and they want to take our freedom in the West, and they want to come and they want to take Berlin. They want to take France. So they're saying that Russia is going to come invade us. They're going to come invade us and try to take our land. But meanwhile, we're going to send all of our already limited military equipment. We're going to send much of it to Ukraine so it can be destroyed there. But still, at the same time, we're concerned Russia is going to come attack us. If you're so concerned about Russia coming to attack you, why are you sending all your military hardware away? It falls apart immediately as soon as you think critically about anything these people say. It falls apart. I wanted
just so you know, I unfortunately I have to run at the 1 hour and 30 minute. So we've got about 6 minutes left.
Okay, I understand. I'm going to jump to some questions. I'm a member of an organization called the Center for Political Innovation, and they're a sponsor of the Rage Against the War Machine rally.
Is that Caleb's group?
Yes, that is Caleb's group.
Are you
Yeah.
going to be in? Are you going to be in DC?
Unfortunately, I'm not going to be. I wish I could.
Because I'm
be.
actually going to meet with him afterwards.
Oh,
I've
really?
been invited to his reception, and it's the only one I'm going to. So.
Oh, well, great. He's a great guy. I think it's a great organization. But they wanted me to ask a couple questions, if you
Sure.
don't mind doing that real
Yeah.
quick. The first one is, what do you think is the way forward for the peace movement in America in the long term?
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the peace movement needs a victory.
Mm-hmm.
If you bite off too much and you have, a purity litmus test that can't be met by people, you're just doomed to fail. I think the biggest threat in the world today is nuclear weapons. And I think the best way to control nuclear weapons is through arms control. And so what I would advise the peace movement is, instead of trying to redefine the Ukrainian-Russian conflict in a way that meets your ideological purity tests, stop. That war happened. You're not going to stop that war. You're not going to alter the war. Crying for negotiated settlements. Russia doesn't care. And it's going to be a defeat. And the problem with defeat is defeat becomes addictive, because then what happens is, when you become accustomed to losing your cause, every windmill you tilt at kicks you off your horse. You simply then are just going through the motions of doing something that makes you feel good, feel relevant, even though you're not succeeding. And that's the peace movement right now. Mm-hmm. The peace movement needs to learn how to win. They have to win a battle. And I think you pick a battle that you can win. And I personally am picking arms control and trying to get meaningful arms control back on the table. You see, if you do that, that's a victory. And it also has a meaningful outcome. It helps create a condition where World War III doesn't break out. And once you do that, you've redefined the landscape now. And now we have people talking, negotiations are taking place, and then you can pick the next thing to go on. I think the peace movement has to stop being this broad movement where you're never going to win a battle because you've bitten off too much. And what it has to do is say, these are some fundamental principles that we adhere to, but we're going to pick little battles at a time, and we're going to start winning. And after a time, if you win a battle, you just won a campaign. And then if you win a couple campaigns, now you have a movement, and now you can have an impact. But you just you have to start winning. And sometimes the best way to do is win a skirmish, not try to win the war. I think the peace movement's problem is that while it's a great cause, they're trying. I watched the anti-war movement against the Iraq War fall apart because they couldn't agree on anything, because they had purity tests. This group couldn't meet with that group, couldn't meet with this group. I kept telling the anti-war movement that your best ally would be, especially in a war in Iraq, would be the oil industry, and that you should actually be going out talking to ExxonMobil, talking to Chevron, talking to all these people about the dire economic consequences of a war in the Middle East. And they were like, we would never talk to them. Then you're never going to win, because you can't build allies. I'm not asking you to endorse oil policy. You said you're an anti-war movement. So why don't we stop a war? Wouldn't that be nice? But they don't want to stop a war. They're using the anti-war movement to promote their own other issues. And that's a recipe for disaster. So I would drop the purity, and trying to make everybody, if you're going to be anti-war, you also have to be, pro-green, pro this, pro that. No. Anti-war means one thing, anti-war. And then I would narrow it down even further, that we are pro-arms control. You say, well, that's not an anti-war movement. Yeah, it is, because the best way to stop World War III, the best way to stop nuclear conflict, is to be pro-arms control. Yeah. So let's win a battle. That's a big battle to win. That would be my approach. And I know people disagree with that, and that's fine. But that's why I've walked away from the anti-war movement, because I don't want to lose again. I put everything I had into trying to stop a war against Iraq. And at the end of the day, I was left alone on the field of battle, because everybody fled, because they weren't really anti-war. They were whatever they were, but they weren't anti-war.
Yeah, it seems to me like the anti-war movement in the U.S. they're so hijacked. People say they're anti-war and they say we have to send weapons to Ukraine to stop Russia, Putin's evil war. Oh, you're anti-war, but you want to send more weapons so more
Yeah.
Ukrainians die. That makes no sense. Well, we're coming up on the hour and a half mark, so I guess.
Well, if you got more questions, go ahead. I respect your organization. So if you have more questions from the organization, go ahead and ask them.
Yeah, another question they had from the younger group. There's a shoot-off organization of CPI called the American Student Union, and it's mostly college students. They wanted me to ask, what should the American youth be doing right now to try to prevent World War III and nuclear annihilation and things of that sort, specifically the youth.
All right. Well, here's my challenge to the youth, and it challenged to everybody. But 2024 is a national election. It's going to be a big deal. And I think it's important, again, to win a battle. I'm trying to put together a 1,000,000-man rally in Central Park in June of 2024 that mimics what happened in June of 1982. And the reason why this is important, people need to understand that if it weren't for that 1,000,000-person rally in Central Park in 1982, we may not have been able to break out of the rust that had held the arms control community together under Ronald Reagan. But because 1,000,000 people came out, the rust got shaken off, and 5 years later, we got the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty that literally saved the world. What can the youth do? Get excited about arms control. Get excited about arms control. And help me, help you, help us. Let's work together to create a victory. The victory is to put 1,000,000 people in New York City, but now we're in the day and age of, in addition to 1,000,000 people in New York City, let's fill stadiums around the country on the same day with people who aren't demonstrating against something. It's not a negative. You're demonstrating for something. You're rallying in support of arms control. Make this a singular issue, because you said, how do we stop World War III? We stop World War III through effective arms control. That's how we stop World War III. And if you do this in June of 2024, you're going to make arms control an issue that must be addressed by anybody running for higher office. Make arms control a signature issue for the 2024 election. Make politicians have to answer questions about arms control. For instance, do they believe in the sole purpose theory, that the sole purpose of America's nuclear arsenal should be nuclear deterrence? Will they reject preemptive strike doctrine that is currently that which defines nuclear posture? Will they work with the Russians to revive the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty? Will the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, the foundation of modern arms control, be brought back? Can the United States work to remove ABM systems that don't work? And get involved. That's what I would say. Again, there's people out there that might have different agendas, and I'm fine. You asked a question, what I would say, and you specifically linked it to World War III. The only thing that's going to stop World War III is arms control. Right now, we are headed on a trajectory where the last nuclear arms control agreement between the United States and Russia expires in January, February of 2026. And when that's gone, the arms race is on, and this will probably be the last arms race we enter in, because the world is going to end, because there will be a mistake made and there will be a nuclear war. You want to save the world? You want to save the world for yourselves, because you guys are young enough, you're going to be around for a couple more years. You want to save it for your children, for your grandchildren, if you're thinking that far ahead. Arms control, baby. Arms control. So you want to do something? I'm telling you right now, I am creating a mission to put 1,000,000 people in Central Park in June of 2024. Help me. Remember we talked about that team thing? If you think I can put 1,000,000 people in Central Park in June 2024 by myself, some of this. It ain't going to happen, guys. But it can happen if we build a team. So what I'm trying to tell you is, let's become a team on this. Let's work together. And it doesn't have to be Scott Ritter's mission. I'll step aside, man. It's not about me. It's about the victory. It's about the end result. And if you've got people that want to take a leadership position, run with this baby, let's do it. Let's get together. Let's work together. And if we join together as a team, we create, sort of a momentum that other people might want to join. And then you have this whole thing going where suddenly putting 1 million people anywhere isn't a problem because you got 1 million people that agree this is a good idea. There's a lot of people out there that talk about the apathy of the college student. Well, prove them wrong. Prove them that you're not a bunch of ignorant, consumer-driven, losers who just want to play computer games and I don't know. I'm not being mean here. I'm just saying there's people out there right now that don't think much of the college kids today. Prove them wrong. Prove them wrong by winning. And I'm telling you right now, you put 1 million people in Central Park in 2024, in June 2024, you will control the narrative of the 2024 election. It will be one of the most talked about issues, and the politicians will have to pay attention and have to commit to certain policies, and then you're going to compel people to think about it for the first time. So let's do that. That would be my answer.
I think that's a great answer. I think you're completely right about we need a team. We need to build a coalition, and we can't exclude people because, oh, they're libertarian, or, oh, they one time said they support guns, or they don't believe in abortion. We can't do that.
I don't care what color you are.
Yes.
I don't care what religion you are. I don't care what your political belief system is. I don't care anything about you except that you want to seriously work to get arms control back on the political agenda of the United States to save the world. Because when the world ends, all that other stuff doesn't matter. You can't sit there and say, well, I was a good, Black Lives Matter supporting climate control person. You're dead.
Yeah.
No one cares. You're dead.
And so
all the things you think you believe in can't happen if the world ends. So put all of that aside for a second and let's save the world. And then after that's done, once we eliminate nuclear threat, then you can pick the next thing you want to. Scott Ritter's done at that point in time because I'm sort of a single issue kind of guy. But maybe at that point in time, you can find another person who says, hey, climate change is, I'm not trying to promote climate. I'm just saying that whatever topic you want to pick, racial inequity, economic innovation, you pick the cause, you build the coalition, you move forward. But none of your causes matter if there's going to be a nuclear war. And I'm telling you right now, if arms control goes away, there will be an arms race, and we will not live through that arms race. It will be the end of the world. This is the scariest thing that anybody should. I hope I'm giving everybody nightmares.
It should. I mean, it's 5 million degree fireball. You won't exist. It will vaporize everything. The atoms will be gone.
A brief moment, you get a nice suntan.
A brief moment. I wonder if you even feel it. I've always thought that. Is it just like that, and you feel nothing? Or,
yeah. Well, that's if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, you actually you don't get by the fireball, but then the radioactive cloud comes in, and then you get the thrill of a slow, gruesome death as everybody dies around you. Everything you care for. You like kittens, you like dogs, they're going to die. Are you going to die of radiation poison before you die of starvation? Because you won't be able to eat the food, you won't be able to drink the water. You're going to die. Oh, I'm going to dig a hole in the ground. I'm a survivalist. You're going to die. That's the reality. You're all going to die. Now, I know we all die eventually, but don't we want to leave the world? I mean, one of the things that makes humanity function, because we're all so selfish saying, well, I don't care, I'm going to die anyways. Well, God, we're not very good as humans. And because my parents had that attitude, I wouldn't be around. And my grandparents had that attitude, I wouldn't be around. So we need to have the attitude that while we are going to die, it is inevitable that we have to make sure before we die, we create a world where our children can have a good quality of life so that they can pass it on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. That's what humanity is about.
Yes.
Making the world better for the next generation. There will not be a next generation because there won't be a world if we don't stop the scourge of nuclear weapons. And the United States is a leader. The Russians are there. The greatest threat to the ending the world right now is in the hands of the two nations who have the singular capacity to end the world. So let's get them to talk together. Let's stop. People are like, well, why don't you work with the Arms Control Association? Because they're not an arms control association. They claim to be an arms control association, but they don't believe in arms control. They believe in sustaining American strategic dominance. That's it. They don't believe in arms control. They have been bought out. They are captured by the system. So I don't want to work with the Arms Control Association. I don't want to work with the deep state. I don't want to work with the system because the system is fundamentally broken. We have to change the system, and that's not going to happen from within, only from without. When we, the people, put pressure on our elected representatives to make meaningful change. So let's be our own Arms Control Association. Let's come together. Let's work together as a team. Let's make this thing happen.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to do that. Like I said, unfortunately, I'm not going to be in Washington for the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I'd really like to be, but I think you're going to really, I think you're really going to enjoy being around the CPI people. They agree with what you're saying. They're trying to build a coalition of people to stop World War III and to make the United States and the world a better place. So I think you're really going to get along with them. I'd love to come to that Million Man March rally. I will do whatever to help to promote it.
You're invited.
I will be there. 2024 June. I will be there. One more thing, the CPI, and they asked me to ask you to speak at the event. I understand you have some personal reasons you don't want to, but
to speak at the event, at the rally, or at their event?
At the Rage Against the War Machine event.
I can't. If I speak at it, the event will end. I mean, this
I
is the
understand.
threat that was put there. I wanted to speak. I wrote a speech. I was prepared to deliver the speech. But if I insisted on being there, then the Libertarian Party would, and they own the permits. That's the problem. There's no way to get away from the fact that the Libertarian Party owns the permits. They would have withdrawn their support, pulled the permits, and the event would have died. So I can't speak at the event. A lot of people are telling me, stick to your guns, get up there, do it. Hey, you're talking to a Marine. I don't run away from a fight. So if I actually thought that I could battle my way onto the stage and stake my ground out and deliver the speech, I would do it because it's fun. I love nothing more than a good fight. And so I would do it. I'm a little old, but I could get a little physical if they want that. But that's not what we're talking about. This is about the Libertarian Party, which has hijacked this rally and is seeking to control this rally by controlling who gets to speak at this rally. And they are threatening to pull the plug if I spoke. So as much as I would like to speak there, as much as people want me to, if I insisted on doing this, it would kill the rally. And I don't think anybody wants the rally to die. Yeah. So let's let the rally go forward. Let's let it be the success it can be. And then let's use the rally as a springboard for bigger and better things. But let's make sure as we go forward, we invite people that are interested in going forward, not interested in controlling the present.
Yeah.
And the Libertarian Party, unfortunately, the way it's currently manifested, I don't think they could be a viable partner for anything I plan on doing. I'll take any libertarian that wants to come in. I don't care about your political affiliation. Any person that wants to come in, any individual that wants to come in, or if individuals are organized in an organization like CPI that is positive and wants to play a positive role, come on in, man. We'll be a good team. But if you're part of a party that seeks to use the cause as a way of furthering the party's ambition, no, yeah, you don't get to play.
Yeah. Well, I know for a fact the CPI people are very big fans of you. Caleb is. I'm sure they would love to have you speak at their event after the rally.
Well, I'm going to attend. What happens after that, we'll see. I mean,
we will see.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoy yourself at that rally, at the rally, and at the CPI event. CPI is I know I've said it 1,000 times about it, but they're great people. It's a great organization. So I think you'll really enjoy it. I figure we should wrap up. You have to go.
Yeah, I got to get going. So
right.
Thanks again for this conversation, and I'm sure it won't be the last one we have, especially if we become part of this team and we can begin a process of motivating and educating people about trying to make a meaningful impact on the 2024 election, putting arms control on the agenda.
That's very important. I would love to be a part of that. And your book, Disarmament in the Time of Perestroika, people should go and read that. It's very relevant to what we're talking about.
It's the template. It's the template for what we're talking about.
Yes. Well, I look forward to staying in touch with you, and have a good day.
All right. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. See ya. All right. So we just had Scott Ritter on. I thank everybody for watching. I imagine most of you came from Scott's Telegram channel. But please like and subscribe here if you like what you saw. A lot of my streams, I talk about the same thing Scott and I just talked about. I stream fairly often. You can also follow me on Telegram, on Twitter. It's in the description. You can find Scott's Telegram in the description, and you can find information about the Center for Political Innovation in the description. I'll stay on here for a couple minutes if anybody in the comments has any questions or statements or anything. But thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe, like I said, if you could, and share the stream. No, Anthony, I am not, and neither is Scott. Man, there have been some trolls in this chat. I was seeing some people saying that. I just didn't have time to monitor it. Perhaps I should have next time. Yes, everywhere Scott goes, trolls follow. That's very true. It's very sad. It's very sad. All right. Well, it looks like the trolls are going crazy here. I'm going to go ahead and hop off of here. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Check out my Telegram and my Twitter. You can also find Scott's Telegram down below. I'm sure Scott and I will talk again in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.